Welcome to the Computer Repair Podcast, episode number 290, Working Together. I'm your host, Jeff Halash. This is our live show where we discuss the ins and outs of running your computer repair business. Computer Repair Podcast is brought to you by Malwarebytes TechBench, the comprehensive partnership program for repair shops looking to boost margins and grow their business. This includes a portable tool set to help you diagnose, remediate, and secure PCs. Malwarebytes TechBench, built for technicians by technicians. Sign up today at malwarebytes.com/techbench. Let me introduce the co-hosts. We have Brad Torrey from TTCS Computer Services. How you doing, Brad? You might need to unmute your microphone first.
You told me to mute, and then you tell me to unmute. Make up your mind, Jeff. No, I'm good. We're just sweating it out here in the summertime, but I can't complain.
Yeah, I don't want to hear because, in the wintertime, I'm the one that's complaining and you're in beautiful weather. So whatever. Also joining us, brand new to this show, is Anthony Remis from Remis Computer Solutions. How you doing, Anthony?
Good, thanks. I'm not sweating it out, even though it's 105 outside. Brad.
Look, some of us, our houses were built in the 60s and we didn't have air conditioning. All right.
I'm jealous because I used to live in Orange County next to Brad, so I miss the weather sometimes.
All right. So it's good having you guys on the show, and this is going to be a phenomenal show talking about working together. But before we do that, we're going to do our normal segment we're going to share a tip or a story, and Brad, I'm going to have you kick it off.
Yeah, okay. So first, we'll just real quick, since John's not here and I can't throw any bombs in that direction, I got to go with you because you are here, Jeff. You always talk about like Google searches not being very productive. I don't know if I'm like a ninja or something, but I still use Google a lot to very good results. I find a lot of things that help me in my day-to-day. So, there's an art to it. Maybe you just, if you want a little time after the show, I can show you some tips. And so I'm totally just playing.
Wow.
But, yeah,
I'm hurt.
No.
I'm crying.
Well, no, but just,
what? Listen. Okay, that's fine. You can say whatever you want. Just remember, in less than a week's time, I'm going to be in punching distance, and I'm going to punch you really hard in the shoulder. Okay?
Hey, out of respect, everything I say bad about you is to your face.
That's true. I'll give you that.
Anyway, no, my real tip though is if you're gonna like step out of your comfort zone or like break your rules, just make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into. Which I did. This is not me learning from a mistake. This is me like following my own advice. I have a really good, kind of newish client. They have a medical related practice, and I do their office stuff. And at home, he asked me to just help out with a few little things. And I don't do a lot of residential calls, but I do it for business owners that I'm already like working with. So I go over there, and we had an electrician run a line to a camera, and it wasn't working. But I'm more familiar with like his network and the wiring and stuff because I had already been there once before. So I literally went there because the last time I'd been at his house, I forgot one of my drill motor. So I was going to pick it up, but he's like, "Hey, while you're picking this up, if you wouldn't mind taking a look at this camera." So I picked this day to go there because it was a day that I didn't have a lot scheduled. Like it was a very light day. Most of my stuff was desk work. I don't know what I'm going to get into when I drive over there. It's not super far away, but it's literally as far away from a freeway as you can get in Southern California and still be like in a normal area. So I knew I was going to drive way over there, and I'm probably going to get stuck there for a while. 6 hours later, 2 trips into the attic, running a new cable, all of these things. So we got the camera online. Everything's all buttoned up. It's super pretty. He's super happy. But that was a walk in. Hey, got my drill. I'm out of here. 6-hour trip. Like, you got to know. And then, he offered me a beer at the end. He's like, "Man, thank you so much for sticking in there and like making that happen." So that was one of those times where you're like, man, if I just rolled in there not expecting anything, and then I'm not going to drive back there again I mean, it's one of those where like I don't want to go there. It's the farthest drive I can think of right now. It would have been disappointing for him, like me trying to kind of come in and do a favor and not being able to handle it, but instead it was me rolling in there and going, yeah, no, whatever we got to do, let's get this thing fixed, and we got it fixed, and he was really happy. I probably just if I ever like get really busy and can't respond super fast to like a business call, I've probably earned myself a couple of brownie points now, and and kind of like get past those and whatever. Like it was a good day because I planned to get stuck in God knows what. So anyway,
That's good.
That's the story.
Now, I will say the only thing I was thinking about the whole time you were talking, so I didn't really hear much of it. No, I'm just kidding. Is the picture behind you missing the Easter egg? I just want to say, okay, it's gone from the picture. So
it fell, and nobody commented about it, so nobody knows.
I know. So next time you're watching the live show on YouTube or on podnutz.com/CRP
I don't know if this fits into the frame. I have another Easter egg.
Oh boy! All right, yeah, it fits in the frame. It blocks your face, so that's good.
No, I won't leave it there. But anyone who's watching can, they get it.
All right, so let's go ahead and go. Now that we're having plenty of fun, let's go to Anthony. And what is your tip or story for us that we can learn from today?
I want to start by saying Brad's totally right. It's an art to Google. Because when I started to get into like camera gear, I felt so useless Googling camera gear. I'm like, I could Google computer stuff really good. Why can't I Google camera stuff really good? But basically, my thing is use forums to your advantage. Having a presence in forums, business-related forums, to your stuff that's related to your business. Because let's say you do a lot of accounting work for accountants, maybe find a QuickBooks forum, because half the time these places have like hardware sections. And it's a good way to make contacts, because that's kind of like the short story of how I got one of my biggest customers right now. So I'm thankful for forums and social media and how that evolved.
Yeah, that's good because you got to have that information out there. Not every one of us is going to know everything, so we have to sometimes look to others. And there's plenty of information on the internet. And going back to the Google searches and it being an art form, number one, my biggest complaint is not that I can't find the stuff. It's just harder to find the stuff. And the problem I have is with forums and other things, websites in general, is that when you go and find something, the problem is I will go down a rabbit trail of all the people that had a comment that had nothing to do with the question asked. If you don't want to answer the question, just shut up and move along. You don't have to comment. I know it seems like a disease out there where people just want to comment because they think they want to be heard. If you want to be heard, start a podcast. You can say whatever you want, just like I am right now, and get away with it. But not in a forum. I put my face out there. Here I am. Everybody knows where my address is. It's not. It boggles my mind of why I have to waste time reading comments that have nothing to do with the question was answered.
What's worse is when they don't update and like let you know what solved the problem. There's like 5 very possible solutions, and then you never hear from the original poster again. I'm like, what fixed it?
Yeah, you look at the timestamps, and it's like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and then it stops, and you're like, okay, I know what happened. You were up all night trying to fix this thing, and then you finally fix it, and you're just like, all right, I'm out. You never get back. Like, what happened?
You know what?
Yeah.
They nuked and paved. That's what happened.
A lot of times, yeah, probably.
Anyways, so yes, I love being able to find things on the internet. I love to be able to collaborate with other people, and quite honestly, that's what we do here. Because I don't always have all the solutions, but I bring people on that can bring us solutions and ideas and just things to think about. And hopefully we do a little bit of that with a little bit of entertainment and make your life that much better. If not, I have no idea why you're watching or listening. Either way. So anyways, my personal tip for today is I was reading another book, and I've been on a book binge lately. I'm going back through books that I bought in the past and have never listened to. And I said, you know what? I paid money for these things. I might as well get something out of them. Well, and I'm glad I did, because there are some things in here, quite honestly, I don't know why I bought this book other than maybe the title. And the title of the book is Smarter, Faster, Better: The Secrets of Being Productive in Life and Business. So it sounds really good. Hey, how do I be productive in my life and business? And one of the things, this is like a 10-hour book. I wasn't going to bring it up till I finished it, but I've only got about an hour left, and I've got the gist of the message. And basically, this talks about how sometimes you need to change things up from the way that you're used to doing them in order to free your mind up to be able to come up with a solution, whether it's in collaborating with others, whether it's just in resting your mind a little bit so that you can think outside the box and not be stuck in the way that you've always done stuff. And we've talked about it a lot on the show, where I think this is very important. Talk about mindset. And there are a lot of people out there. Here's another, I'm going to go off on another little tangent. There's a lot of people that I listen to in these different groups and stuff like that, Facebook groups, forums, etc. And there'll be people that, and I've heard this from business owners for years outside of this business, not even inside this business. They're like, hey, if you want to be an entrepreneur, that's awesome. It's a great thing to do. But guess what? You're basically going to have to sell your soul, your kids, and your wife, and everybody you know to the devil, because you're going to spend all your time in this business. And to that, I will say that, yes, a lot of people do that, but it doesn't mean they're doing it right. Now, in my opinion, which is the right opinion, it basically, your life will go through seasons. And it just doesn't matter if it's your personal life or if it's your business life. Sometimes you will have to dedicate more time in your business than you really want to. But if this continues on for a long period of time and you're letting other things go, health, family, etc., your fun time, whatever that might be, then there's a problem. And you need to realize that there's a problem and that you can actually solve the problem. And sometimes it's by getting out of your own way, taking a step back, taking time and putting it into your business from a perspective of not just doing the business, but actually putting it into the business and fixing the things that need to be fixed. Will it all be fixed in 2018? Probably not. Will it be fixed in 2019? Probably not. But guess what? If you don't ever start fixing problems that you have, they will never get fixed. So you need to take the little tiny steps in your business, in your life, in order to make your life better. Because let's face it, we all get older, we all get set in our ways, and that's not a good way to be. Here's the one thing I say to everybody out there, and I've said this time and time again: if you're not learning something on a daily basis, give up and go home now. Because there's no point, in my opinion, of doing anything. I learn something new every day. And I learn things from the newest people to the oldest people in the business. There's always little nuggets of information I can glean and go, okay, I can make this small adjustment in my business, and it's going to make things better. I can make this small adjustment in my family life and make this things better. I can make a small adjustment in my budget or how I think about money and make my life better. So something for you to think about, but definitely a good book. The last couple books that I've talked about, you got to get through the first chapter, because at first these books, I don't know if it's because it's in audio form, but they almost seem a little convoluted in the beginning. But get past the first chapter and you will get the whole message that they're talking about and understand. And I love these books that are telling the perspective from different industries, different organizations, different people. It's awesome. So definitely a mind opener for me as far as how I think about certain things now. And plus I learned some things about, how, maybe a different a movie was made or something like that, in the thought process, where they started and what it ended up being. And because they took a different perspective on it and kind of changed the way that they normally would do stuff. So anyways, that's my personal tip.
I linked to that book in the show notes for you.
Awesome. Thank you. You're the man. All right. So we are going to talk about working together. And I know we've talked about this in the past, working with vendors and whatnot, but The reason I've got Brad and Anthony here is these two guys collaborated together a long time ago. And Anthony is a person that basically builds high-end machines. And that's now, would it be fair to say that that's the majority of your business or all of it?
That's like 99.9%. Well, 95%. Delitting Intel processors is probably that other 5%.
Okay. So you're basically building and messing around with custom machines. And that's your business. Now, there'll be people out there that will tell you, you can't do that. There's no way to make that work. Again, get out of your own head. I'm not saying this to you, but just people in general. If this is something you want to do and you have a passion to do, then I say go for it and figure out a way to do it, because there is a way.
Yep.
Anthony is proof positive of being able to do this.
When I met Anthony a couple years ago, that's what I told him. He was like, "Oh, I'm trying to get into start off this," and I was like, "Dude, don't even do it." And he was like, "No, I'm going to do it." And I'm like, "All right, well, whatever I can do to help you." But man, you're in for a rough road. But he's crow. I'm happy to eat the crow. Like, I'm happy that I was wrong.
Yeah.
Well, what else is new? I mean,
yeah, like 2 weeks later after the initial meeting, because I heard Brad on one of the Podnutz shows, and he said Santa Ana wins, and I'm like, the dude's local. I only know so many people that'll mention the Santa Ana wins. We had a lunch meeting just to introduce each other and how maybe we could work together. And then I was calling him up, hey man, I got an account and they need a good IT guy, but they need custom computers, and that was really our first project together. So I think the Podnutz would network.
Well, I appreciate that, and thankfully, that's what we try to do. Is we try to help people to think outside the box and do the things that they enjoy doing, even when it seems like it's not something that's going to work. But I want to hear from your guys' perspective of basically, Brad, why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit of intro of what you guys did and how you basically started partnering together. And then we'll have, Anthony kind of talk about, then we're going to geek out about some stuff that I want to know what delitting is and all this other kind of geeky stuff. So anyway.
For sure. And then I'll just sit back and you guys can, I'll just be here for the ride. So, it was, I made a note because I actually went back and looked it up. It was February 2015 is the day. No, but that was the show that we were on, and I was talking about like Taco Bell exploding and and some Mylar balloon had gone up and blown into some electrical wires and stuff. And then we had that lunch and we were just hanging out, and I'm like, no, you know what? This guy's cool, and we could, if nothing else, we can at least be friendly and like hang out and whatever. But it turns out Anthony's really into stuff that I don't really want to make time for. And I have a lot of experience in things that he doesn't. So it works out really well. Like, I would never even take on this. The first project we had that Anthony referred me to was that architect with all these custom built PCs. If they had asked me for IT support, I'd be like, yeah, but we got to find somebody who can actually like knowledgeably support this hardware, because it's not my area of expertise. All my other clients have like Dell Optiplexes that are off the shelf, and we build off the shelf. Like, we've got networks, we've got standard business Dell PCs or whatever it is. We don't do, like, I don't know if you've got an NVIDIA. Now I know more of these models and stuff because I'm working with Anthony, but like, I wouldn't have even known GTX or whatever. TI means one thing or something, like Titan. The word Titan, like, oh yeah, no, Titan is a Greek thing, right? That's like mythology, right? No, it's anyway, all that stuff I would know nothing. So Anthony is my guy, and anybody that asks me about hardware, I go, yeah, I have filtered knowledge, but I have a guy who knows all of that stuff, and his name is Anthony, and here's his contact info if you want a custom build PC. And then I've got some accountants who have one of his computers as their, their daily driver. And it's like, for Anthony, it's his lowest grade computer, but for them, it's like the best computer they've ever had in their entire life. And it's just been a great relationship. He and I, if I've got a question, we bounce it off him. He bounces questions off me. We share our expertise, and we're both better off for it. And that was really, and that's been going on for a period of years. Sometimes that stuff works out for like a month or two, whatever, and then you kind of fall off. No, like this has been great, and it's evolving and it's growing, and so it was definitely worth bringing up on the show as like, find people who you can coexist with that have different levels of different areas of expertise, and just be, a better team for it.
Yeah, totally. And now how the progression is still occurring is now I'm doing white label builds for a company that focuses on architecture computers, and we need like more serious support, like enterprise kind of support. So now guess what? Brad's coming in and he's going to fill that gap. I'm building the computers, and the owner gets to focus on selling and everything he's good at. And it's just technically like three different businesses working together for one end goal. So yeah, and collaborating with other companies is a big part for me, because I'm just one guy, and there's quotes out that we have right now that are like 100 computer quotes. And I mean, I could maybe do like 50 a month if I'm not sleeping. And so through social media, like I mentioned earlier, Instagram in particular, I kind of keep an eye out who the other good builders are. And there's a few guys I've reached out to, like, dude, I'll fly you in if I need help. Well, is that something you could do? Yeah, man. Like, cause they're business owners too. And I'm like, I'm not afraid to work with other people. Cause I mean, like you always say, Jeff, there's always plenty of work for everybody. And the margins are good enough where we could put them in a room, not like the Venetian, but we could put them in a room and pay them for the week or so I might need somebody. So yeah, it's totally awesome.
So now, Anthony, tell me from your perspective, when you first met up with Brad, what was your thought and what was your intent as far as the relationship that you and Brad were beginning at that point?
So I knew my passion was building computers. Like, man, maybe in 2007 or so, I took a network plus class, and right before CompTIA ended its lifetime certification, I was taking a class to take it, and networking was cool, but it wasn't my passion. So I kind of like got bored of it. And then once they stopped the lifetime certification, I'm just like, it's not even worth me taking at this point. I have zero passion for networking. I was all about building computers. So I'm like, man, so I don't look like an idiot to these business owners. Like, I'm really good with hardware. I understand how to build a balanced computer. I need an IT guy. I need someone that's really good with networking, so that if a project comes up, I have someone like, yeah, I got a guy for that. So that was going through my head at the time. And when I heard Brad on the show, I'm like, this sounds like a real nice guy, honest guy. That's like the hardest thing to find, is someone that's nice and knowledgeable, that's not out for themselves. And we have zero interest in competing against each other for jobs. Like, I'll never want a networking job, and I know Brad will never want to build a computer. So I'm like, this is perfect. And I reached out to Brad, and it just, hey, we had a good time talking, and it was kind of like, yeah, sure, if anything ever comes up. And I remember shortly after that, I met with the business owner of that architect firm, and he's like, this is what I need. My guy in LA, he was in Costa Mesa and his guy was in Los Angeles. That might only be 30 miles, but that's like 2 hours in California time. At least, like in peak traffic, it may take more than 2 hours to get to his place in Costa Mesa. So he was telling me all the needs, and I'm thinking like, dude, I could build good computers, but networking isn't what I want to do. But of course, you got your business face on. I'm like, totally, I got you. Right when I left that meeting, I called Brad up. I'm like, Brad, I got this project and I need someone like you. Can I introduce you to him? And I didn't introduce him like Brad's one of my employees. It was, this is Brad. He has a business. He's my guy who does support. I focus on the hardware and staying up to date and all of that good stuff. I provide a warranty for the computers I build. And the business owner was totally happy with that. Didn't bother him. And we've been collaborating ever since. So I've done a few builds for Brad's clients, stuff like that. And then I try to send work to Brad whenever someone calls me off of Yelp or something.
Yelp. People still use Yelp?
I know I got a call from Yelp if it's something like anything but a custom build. Like, hey, I need this repaired, or hey, my network this or that. And I'm like, I got a guy. That's not my focus. Here's Brad. I don't know how many of them have actually ended up in being work. I think Brad did maybe one attempt at data recovery. I don't know. But I try to filter them.
I still work for Daryl. It's cool.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, man. I don't know if Brad shared that story, but that's a sad, sad story.
And which one was that?
The hard drive one, Brad?
No, I mean, it's not. Oh, yeah. I have told this story on the air, but it's just a guy gave me a hard drive that was the only copy of all the pictures of his family for the past 20 years or whatever. Like every digital photo that they've taken, including like his deceased parents and stuff or whatever, like stuff that's completely irreplaceable. He gave it to some IT guy that he knew from a previous job. That guy opened up the casing on a hard drive with a screwdriver to attempt data recovery, like not in a clean room. All the warranty stickers were gone, and like the drive had clearly been opened. So I sent it into a local, like really good data recovery service that I know here, and they're like, "Sorry, man." And they didn't charge. They're like, look, if we get data out, we charge. If we don't get data out, we don't charge. They're like, but this one's going to be double because some jackass has opened it up. And they were like, what? Anyway, I'm pretty sure I've shared that story before, but it was really sad because he lost all those photos. And then they were like, there's no way. And they tried. They attempted to recover, but it was wrecked. There was dust and whatever else all up in there. And the guy that opened it didn't just stop at opening the lid. He monkeyed with stuff, and
I think they said there was there like physical impact on one of the platters or something?
They were like totally scratched and like ruined.
Yeah.
The guy, I don't know, like what was he trying to like use a record player and a needle to read I don't know what he like, what are you doing, man? What are you trying to do? Anyway,
and the human element, man, he was like, yeah, I'm just going to hold on to this because maybe one day someone will have a way to recover this data. And I'm like, yeah, man, you never know. But unfortunately, right now, we don't really think there's nothing we could do. And you could tell, like, I was having this conversation with him on the phone. You could just hear he was so disappointed through the phone. It was just like, I'm like, oh, I felt bad for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bummer. That's not something that you don't want to be, even the person in the middle. You still feel bad for these people when stuff like that happens. And, here's the thing. And this is why I've said often that our profession, what we're professionals at, people need to really start recognizing that. Unfortunately or fortunately, whichever way you look at it, a lot of times the person that is doing this just for fun or is a hobby or something like that, they get lucky a lot of times. And even at work, I often say I'd rather be lucky than good most of the time. And so, and we've all gotten lucky, right? We've all gotten things that work out for us. But the reality is, when you think about the things that a professional will do, like I'm going to take that hard drive and I'm going to image it and make sure I have a physical copy of it before I do anything else. That's what a professional does. Somebody that's not a professional and really doesn't know what they're doing. Yeah, I have no idea why somebody would. If I'm going to open a drive, I'm not opening it. Number one, I'm shipping it off to somebody. The only reason I'm going to open it is to destroy it. That's the only reason. So that's pretty bad.
Yep. Now he's got a NAS and he's got a 321 backup. He's got the NAS, which is rated. He's got an external USB hooked up to that with scheduled backups, and he's got his the stuff that's really important to him, like his photos and music and stuff, is all on his iCloud. So he has multiple copies of everything, and if any one device fails, there's all fail safe. But he had to learn that the hard way, and now, anyway, that was a sad story. But that was a collaborative thing. He had contacted Anthony, and Anthony referred it to me, and we.
So what you guys are telling me is that you can actually work together and not be fighting for each other's businesses, that you're actually passing work off from one to the other to that other person's strengths.
Oh yeah, like here's a perfect example. Right now, some of these computers in the back, these are for the company I'm white label building for. They're going to get these remote workstation cards installed. And it's literally supposed to provide an experience where it's like the computer's like, it feels like it's literally under your desk. There's no like remote software it's hardware. It'll even turn the computer off turn it on when it's off. I'm going to do the physical install. We're going to ship them to Brad. Brad's going to do all the network configuration so that this company can have these on site. And instead of shipping demos out, they could just give people remote access. Hey, well, if you're in the market for just 1 or 3, we're not going to ship you a computer, but remote into it, you could see what it's like. And I'm okay. I don't need to make a ton of, if I'm just popping a card in for 10 minutes, I'll let Brad do all the network configuration stuff because he's going to ultimately be supporting it. And, there's just tons of back and forth. There's a RAID card that's going to Brad, an NVMe RAID card. Sorry, Jeff. There's 4 960 EVOs in RAID 0. And this happened to be a professional who stored data on it. And it was supposed to be like a scratch drive, but, just temporary data, and then it offloads. Well, he wasn't doing that. And he has some very important projects, and it looks like the RAID card died. So I could deal with that, but it's not my focus. Like, I'm going to send it to Brad. Brad's really good at that. I can worry about building computers, which will ultimately make me more money in the long run. Because I could build 4 or 5 computers in the time it takes me to do this RAID recovery. Brad could do that RAID recovery in his sleep, probably. Hopefully, Brad, right?
No, I do most of my best work while I'm sleepwalking. So I wake up and I'm like, oh, I don't remember doing that. No, it's just.
Now, Anthony, were you jabbing at me over the NVMe card because I just replaced my SSD with an NVMe and didn't really see a difference?
I didn't know that, but
that was my fault.
Yeah, Brad was the one that made me spend the money, and so going back to that. So here's the thing: when you go from a spinning drive to an SSD, it is a night and day difference. Okay. Now, there could be some configuration issues that I have set up because I have so many things going on in this computer. One of the other things that I've noticed, and maybe Anthony, you can confirm or deny this, but if you have a spinning drive, Windows still has to do its check on a spinning drive when it's booting up. So it's not like my NVMe drive, which is a, terabyte drive. It's not like it's the only thing that's booting up. It's booting up with the other drive. And so things are taking a little bit longer. And as far as clicking on things or making them work faster, I don't really feel it real world. Now, again, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm doing something wrong.
No, you're right. Because one thing I always do on my personal system, I have 2 systems. The one in the back is 2 NVMe drives. And then the one over here is my workstation with, I'm sorry, Jeff has 2 NVMEs also, but it also has a spinning disk and 2 SSDs. But if I don't set the power settings to not turn off the spinning drive, when I enter like the folder, your folder to my computer, sometimes it'll lag opening because it has to wake up the hard drive, and then it'll populate the list. So at the very least, like, you got to make sure your spinning drives are set to never turn off. What's it really gonna? It's gonna take 1 year off of its life. I don't really care. you know, if you have backups. But yeah, NVMe, from SSD to NVMe, the gains are so little. Like, you're really just experiencing large file transfers. So if you're storing this video locally and it's like 2 gigs when we're done, you know, it's gonna bottleneck by the SSD. If you're storing it on NVMe and going from NVMe to SSD, you're gonna bottleneck. So it's kind of like you kind of got to jump in and go on all NVMe, or you're still gonna you're only as fast as your slowest drive in a way.
And I think that's where I store a lot of files and stuff. Now I keep a lot of stuff on my NVMe drive just because I wanted to experience the fast. Now I will tell you this, you know, going into a game or something like that, it is faster because that's where I'm storing my games now. But I miss the days. I remember back in the day, I remember I had everything on one drive. And the day that I had, even back then, I had 2 spinning drives and I had to look at where I was going to keep certain files and create this whole hierarchy of what I was going to have on one drive, what I was going to have on the other drive. I hated doing that. I wanted everything just to work in the one Windows drive. Well, the problem is I probably should have bought a 2 terabyte NVMe and maybe I could have gotten away with it, but I didn't. So I guess
Yeah.
I guess I could probably throw you know, maybe get a 2 terabyte SSD and use that, which I probably should have done that on the when Amazon had their special deal days. I think they had a I think it was a Samsung drive and it was
Yeah.
a 2 terabyte drive for like 3 something. So it was pretty cheap.
My personal recommendation when I'm speccing out these workstations is I rather have quantity of SSD versus like sheer speed. So I'd rather quote like a 1 terabyte Crucial MX 500. It's a standard SSD, you know, SATA based. I'd rather quote that than a 500 gig NVMe, and then now the guy has to like upgrade his storage in a year, you know, his OS drive. So I usually only go to NVMe or even Samsung. I usually only do that when it's more of a money's no object kind of build. And Crucial MX500, I'll pick them over Samsung any day of the week because you just get more bang for the buck. And it's Micron memory. It's like they're in servers across the world. Like it's just as, you know, Samsung's really good, but if you could get an extra like 500 gigs, you know, it's just you got to work the numbers. But my suspicion, we got this Intel Optane drive, the 900p. I think this might provide that bigger leap in performance from a normal SSD because the small files, the 4K benchmarks it's like 4 times as fast as like a Samsung NVMe. So I want to live with this for about a week or two and see if it's worth it because it is more expensive than an NVMe drive. But Intel got the throughput where now this will do 2 gigs a second on the large files, and it has the really fast reads and writes on the smaller files. That's what Windows is using, the small files.
Gotcha.
But
now I'm using a 970 Evo NVMe drive, and it's supposed to be phenomenal as far as in the throughput and everything is it is fast on the software, on the Samsung software, compared to the Samsung drives I've owned. And as far as the Crucial MX500 series, it's excellent. I actually put some of those in the computers around here and just started upgrading some of my customers' machines with the MX500s. And yeah, it's for them, it's perfect. Actually, my son just put a 1 terabyte drive in his, went from a spinning drive, and night and day difference.
Yep. I use
Yeah.
the MX500s for, like whenever someone's hard drive dies or something, I'm like, okay, well, you're getting an SSD now, and it's going to be an MX500. It's not a gaming machine, but it's killer. I mean, it's almost as good. It's killer.
yeah, the big difference is like your spinning drive. I use Crystal Disk Mark because I need a standardized benchmark. You know, there's other ones like Atto and stuff, but if you look at the 4K reads and writes, you're less than 1 megabyte. Maybe it's 2 megabytes per second on the small files. And going to SSD, you're like at 40 megabytes per second. But going from an SSD to an NVMe,
Oh, you just your mic just cut out for some reason.
What's that?
Here, you're back.
You're back
Oh.
now.
Okay. So the leap from a hard drive to an SSD, you're going from like at best 2 megabytes per second on the small files to 40 to 50, and then an NVMe is like 50 to 60 maybe. So that's what you're really feeling, and that leap is smaller from an SSD to an NVMe, unless you're moving big files.
Now, let me ask you a question. Now, when it comes to operating in your Windows operating system every day, opening the browser, opening a file, whatever that might be, just to look at it, to open a Word document. And maybe my system is a little out of, maybe it's a little bit older, which shouldn't be. It's only a couple years old. But
Yeah, you said it. It's older than.
okay,
If it's more than 6 months, Jeff, I'm sorry.
I know.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, you're right. But so should I ever have the spinning wheel that you get in Windows when you're opening a file or opening the browser or whatever?
Oh, I never get that. Even if you go like 3 generations ago, like Skylake, the sixth generation, even maybe the 4th generation, if you have good storage and your RAM and everything. I mean, I know this is painful, Jeff, but every now and then it's nice to just do a clean install too.
I just did that in January.
So, oh yeah, well, when you got the NVMe, what do you know? What CPU are?
Oh no,
are you
actually, I'm sorry, I just did that like a couple months ago.
I think you mentioned you're on X99, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's probably it, because I know you're not overclocked. I know you're not overclocked, and the core speeds on those, like if you have the 6 core, you're like at 3 point something gigahertz, and going, let's say if you upgraded to the new 8700K, which is going to get replaced soon, but you're going all of a sudden at like 4.3 gigahertz all core render speeds with a boost of like 4.5 or 4.7. So, and it's a more efficient, like the instructions per clock is faster. So it's not like 4 gigahertz versus 4 gigahertz. It's like your 3.2 gigahertz is more like 2.8 gigahertz on that newer system.
Okay.
If that made, I don't know if that made sense, but you're not just gaining
sense
more.
To me, but the rest of the audience just fell asleep.
It only makes sense to me because I've been talking to you for the past 3 years, and otherwise I'd be like, words, numbers, whatever. No, but yeah, Intel's constantly baking in their instruction sets into like they figured out that there's physics is a problem, that they've kind of reached a theoretical limit on how fast they can run a processor a long time ago, really. And so they've been figuring out all these other ways to like bake out performance, and one of them is to improve their instruction set, which means that when you send stuff to the processor, a lot of it's more, there's less coding involved. I don't totally understand computer science, but like the processor does more with what it's given, so it's able to perform faster even though the actual clock speed's the same. So yeah, but I just remember, like, I mean, even 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, when you built the first system that I installed of yours that had NVMe, and it almost seemed like precognition. Like I would just look at it and it would tell me when I was going to click next. And I was like, oh my God.
I remember Brad was like, he called me and he's like, dude, I'm like, this is weird. Like it was like auto-populating at like 2 letters the right thing he needed or something like that. And he's like, dude, that's weird.
Yeah. Wow. It was when you are typing in an address, like a network address into Windows Explorer, so like you're trying to navigate a network path. And if you're doing the local thing, you're like C : whatever Windows, and then it'll auto-populate like the rest of the folders so you can more quickly navigate to where you're going if you're doing a typed in address. But usually it doesn't really do that with network paths. Like you have to know what you're typing, like where you're going. It was pulling stuff in like ridiculously fast. And that was just like that was a silly little thing, but it was crazy how fast it was. And I was like, dude, and I'm like, dude, this thing's like, it's reading the future. It's working faster than I am, and that's fun.
Oh, that's funny. All right, so and we can geek out on all kinds of stuff here in a little bit too. But I want to ask Anthony, when you started doing just custom builds, and I want to talk about this part of your business, did you think in the beginning that you were going to just do custom builds and not do anything else?
So originally my Craigslist ad was custom builds, and then I had a separate one for computer repair. And really fast, I realized I am not doing repair. I mean, maybe part of the problem was because it was on Craigslist, but I got the cheapest of the cheapest people reaching out to me. And they weren't like, my labor rate was something like, I think at the time, this was 3 years ago, I think I was advertising like 40 or 50 an hour. And they were still wanting quotes. So I'm like, okay, well, it's a 3-year-old laptop. Are you sure? Yeah. Okay. Like I quote out a hard drive replacement and this and that. And it's like, I never hear back from them. It's like, so I'm done with this. I waste so much time talking to these people. I'm just, I'm not going to do this. This isn't even my passion. I'd rather build and support the computers I build, because then now I'm not fixing someone else's mistake. Like, all right, yeah, Asus I got a bad board or whatever, but I built it. I'm comfortable with the way it's spec'd. I'm not going to be cursing at Dell for using a crap power supply. Excuse me. I know that's kind of, I didn't mean to like say that word on, but it's like, it's peaceful when I'm fixing a computer that I built. It's not peaceful when a customer tries to do it, and then even though it's under warranty, they still try to do it. That's not so peaceful. But so immediately I knew I was going to niche down into builds. I had a full-time job at the time, so I didn't care. I'm like, if I just do one a month, I'm happy. And there were some months where I've had as much as 20. There's some months I might only do 4 or 5. But the waves are big enough to hold me through the slow times, especially being a home-based business. But yeah, that's kind of how it started. I knew immediately, like, and my first customer, it was still, I didn't even have a business name. It was still an ad on Craigslist. He was an attorney and he was semi-retired, and I built a computer for him. And he's like, you don't realize how good this thing is. Like, he's like semi-retired, so he's had a lot of IT guys, and he used to have his own law practice. So he had an IT guy, and he really encouraged me to also like legitimize yourself, get a business name, because there's people that are going to want what you're doing. So that's kind of how things happened a bit.
That's good. And because there's a lot of people out there, there's a lot of naysayers who say, oh, no, this is not something you can do. Now, I know you moved from California to Las Vegas. We were talking about that before the show. And I was in on a conversation back before you were moving, because we've tried to get you on the show before. And this was the first time we were able to do that once you kind of got settled in. And I remember having a conversation with you where we were talking about, business and what you could do with your business model and how you could do things. And one of the suggestions I had made at the time is I said, hey man, I said that the quality stuff that I see coming out, I haven't personally seen any of your systems, but just the pictures I've seen. And Brad is an honest guy as far as I know. And he basically has said these systems are phenomenal. So, and you know what? It's really hard to please California people anyways. So in this particular instance, I believe him. And so I looked at it and I said, hey, have you ever thought about, there's a bunch of not a bunch, but there's some boutique sellers out there that are selling online and basically shipping these things out. And really, it wouldn't be that much to, ship a computer out, put it in part of the price or whatever, and build your business that way, because the systems you're building are beautiful machines. You take a lot of time and effort with them. And you remember saying, I can't remember exactly what you said, but you're like, yeah, that's a good idea. And it's something you were thinking about at the time.
Yeah.
So is that something you're expanding with now?
Yeah, since actually, ironically, in California, most of my business was local, and I maybe shipped like 3 computers. Now in Vegas, like my computers sales are like 98% out of the state. And I think I'm attracting Californians now because it's like, hey, well, I don't need to charge you tax. You're not in Nevada. So yeah, now it's like the opposite. Most of my sales are out of the state. So it's required me to like kind of standardize, but not so much. Like I have like 2 different shipping boxes and stuff like that, you know. But yeah, that's definitely, if I was closed-minded and didn't want to ship, I wouldn't. I mean, that's like most of my builds now. So definitely evolving is important.
Now, Brad, what did you say when you knew that Anthony was moving away from you?
Well, after all the expletives were done, I said, you know, the circumstances surrounding the move were they're really beneficial for him, and I was like, all right, man, you know what, we'll figure out how to make it work. He's not moving that far. I mean, it's a 4-hour drive. It's not like he's moving across the country where I got to get on a plane. And his wife still has stuff to do around Orange County, so he's still forced to come back and slum it with us every once in a while. So we get to run into each other. And but yeah, it was like, okay, so you're not going to be like right there anymore. And it did take a moment, like a pause, like, oh, but you're like the guy. How am I gonna, you know? For a second, it was like the way this situation worked out really nicely was going to change, and that's always you know, kind of a bummer and scary, but it hasn't really changed that much in reality. You know, he's still there by the phone, and if we've got to do some screen sharing or whatever, you know, it all still works out. The world of computers is amazing, and the internet's a wonderful thing. You can still coexist at a distance. So
yeah,
that's awesome.
One perfect example is I sold a computer who was a referral. Most of my work now is referrals. I kind of don't advertise so much. So I sold it ironically to someone in California near Torrance area. So kind of far from Brad, even though it's like 20 miles away. And just because traffic, man, is so brutal. But anyways, they were having an issue and I knew it wasn't my computer, but Brad was able to remote in. He took care of the issue. Ironically, knew the IT guy.
I have a note to tell that story. Actually, I forgot.
Oh, Brad, go ahead, man, please. And it's like we're working cohesively as if I was still down the street from him. But go ahead, Brad, with your story.
Yeah, I'll try to. Okay, so years ago, like I don't even know, 5 at least years ago, a company that I was working with, a sister company, so it was like a referral of a referral, and I'm working with them, and they're sort of surreptitiously eliminating their IT guy, and I didn't really know the politics of it and stuff, so they just asked me to come in and do things, and I'm like, okay. So I didn't know there was someone else with their hands in. I thought that person was out of it. Well, it turns out that this like the IT guy wasn't really just their IT guy. He actually he owned the building, and he was providing like the back end network for this place. And so when I go in to clean up, like it was their office, and it was a new build, like it was a new thing. It was such a mess. And I'm just like, I gotta tear out and rebuild. I'm just gonna start over. And I made it all pretty and nice. And anyway, I didn't know that I was creating a massive nightmare on the back end. And so it took out, basically what happened was instead of making like separate subnets for everybody, because he was sharing fiber amongst many suites. He just kind of had everybody on one network. Ugh. And I didn't know that because why the heck would that happen? That's insane. And he had like Cisco gear and stuff. He had the tools to do it right. He just was lazy. Anyway, long story short, I'm working overnight because it's a place that has to do business in the morning. I took out the whole building's internet because I didn't know that he was an idiot. And then so I go home because when I tested it before I left, it was working. Basically, what was happening is there was a lot of conflicting DHCPs and routers and like all this stuff on one network. It's just a total massive mess. And I didn't know that. So I went home, went to sleep, and he gets called in, they're freaking out because nothing's working. Like the whole building's freaking out because the whole network's down, and he had to figure out why. He didn't know I was there because they didn't tell him because they didn't tell him he was getting replaced and like all this stuff. Anyway, so that was a whole mess. He and I kind of like made nice afterwards, but we were not friends for a little while because I came in and ripped out his network and blew up his building, and he didn't like that. So I haven't seen this guy or heard from him or talked to him for like 5 years, and then all of a sudden Anthony's got this thing with a customer and they can't figure out and they need some help, and I'm going to help him do the support call. And he goes, yeah, and the guy's name is Wilhelm. I shouldn't say his name on the air, but whatever. And it's in the city that I remember he's from. And I go, how many IT guys with that name are going to be in that city? It's got to be that guy. And it turns out it was. And it was just funny. And like, I had to kind of go, and he didn't remember me. So he doesn't know who I was. He doesn't know that we dealt with each other. And I'm just like, dude, this is what's going on. Can you stop for a second? Let me just help you out. And we did this thing, and it was fine, and it worked. But it was so funny because I'm sitting there going, oh my god, this is the guy. This is the guy. They're like, is he going to remember who I am? No, he's not. It was so funny, and just because I was sitting there like the whole time remembering the experience where he had to get called in the morning, and he was so mad at me, and
that was another thing too. The guy rides his bike to his buildings. So Brad's like, dude, that third element, Brad's like, dude, there's no way there could be another and then the accent I think was the same. So Brad knew like
yep, that's the guy with that name, with that accent, who rides his bike to work. It's funny. Anyway, small world. Be nice to people because you never know.
Yeah, that's true. That is definitely true. All right, let's take a quick break and we'll get into more of this conversation. If you'd like to support this show, I encourage you to go to patreon.com/computer repair podcast. And I want to thank our newest Patreon supporters, Michael Schalke and Edward Carey. I want to thank all of our Patreon supporters for your continued support. By supporting the show, it's $1 a show. You're looking at about $4 a month, price of a cup of coffee. That will get you into the secret Facebook group where you can share with others and in your business, ask questions, no matter how simple or how new, and get those questions answered. And it's a nice, safe environment for everybody to collaborate in and learn things and figure things out together. So that's one of the benefits. But definitely go over to patreon.com/computer repair podcast. And I appreciate everyone out there that is supporting what we're doing here. All right, so let's go. Anthony, I want to talk about delitting because I have no idea. I've been so far out of the business of other than building a computer every 3 years. Because actually I enjoy building the computers, but you obviously get into it a lot more, probably like I did back in the day, like a long time ago, but not so much anymore, like back in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
So what is delitting and how do you offer that service?
So basically around Ivy Bridge, the third generation of the Core series, Intel stopped using solder to bond the metal part, the IHS, the integrated heat spreader. They used to bond that to the actual CPU die with solder. They stopped at Ivy Bridge, and ever since then they've been using normal thermal paste. It works a lot worse than solder. So Intel has improved their CPUs where now it's like today you could get 5.1, 5.2 gigahertz on all 6 cores overclocking, but if you don't delit, it's going to be too hot. So what we're doing is we're delitting CPUs, dropping the temperatures by as much as 20 degrees Celsius, and now that 5 gigahertz is a functional 24/7 overclock. Or computers, the niche, like custom markets getting smaller and smaller, where ITX builds are, now you could get 32, you could even get 64 gigs on an ITX build, like 64 gigs of RAM. So it's maybe the guy doesn't need to overclock, they just can't fit a large cooler. So you delid, you drop your temps, you're not overclocking, but now you're not thermal throttling like Apple does. So there's two purposes to delid. And someone in chat was asking about copper IHSs, and that's standard. I use that just to make life simple. You know, it also reduces temperatures even further if you replace, well, if you replace the stock IHS. This is the IHS, the metal part. If you replace that with a copper one, they're milled, so they're ultra flat. There's no, you know, impure, you know, there's no radius on the IHS, so that'll decrease temperatures by another 2 to 5 degrees Celsius. But when you're using a liquid metal thermal compound, it bonds way better to bare copper than the nickel-plated copper that Intel uses. So to keep it simple, delidding is to replace the thermal paste that Intel uses with a liquid metal-based. It's like gallium or something like that, and it reduces temperatures greatly, and that's why we delid. We, as in me and the person I white label for, because I know the whole we versus I thing. Like I say I usually, but yeah, delidding is important because it's just fixing Intel's laziness. And then there's rumors now that the 9th generation that's coming out will be soldered again because AMD's introduced competition again. So now they got to step up their game. So, and it's, you know, this is basically, it just looks cool. So why wouldn't you want a copper IHS? This is a i9 7900X. It just looks cool. That's the actual CPU. It already has it on there. And, you know, reduces temperatures and it looks cool. Unfortunately, it's covered by the CPU cooler. So
now that's pretty good. 20 degrees Celsius. That is a humongous, for those that don't know, that is a humongous drop in temperature for anybody that's overclocking.
Basically, it'll allow you to get, like on the 6-core Intels, it'll now genuinely let you get a stable 5 gigahertz. Or, I mean, we've done 18-core processors. After delidding, now we could actually bench and operate at 4.5 gigahertz on 18 cores. Whereas if it was a workstation stable overclock, we'd probably be around 4.2 to 4.4. But we've had them as high as 4.7 gigahertz on 18-core processors. So that wouldn't be possible without delidding.
All right. So now here's a personal question. Sorry. So for the X99 board that I use right now, and the processor, the 6-core processor that I have, the Intel processor, Core i7. Now, I don't overclock because in the past I've had problems with, you get these weird issues. Now, obviously, I think for a lot of your stations, you're overclocking out of the box, right? So that they have this stable overclock. And I know we've talked about the process before, but I want to know from a standpoint of, with just a regular Intel processor that's a couple generations old, what should a normal person be able to get out of overclocking their custom machine?
So luckily for you, your X99 is actually soldered. So
oh, we lost your audio again.
am I back yet?
Yep, you're back.
I'm wondering if it's Google Hangouts or something, because I stream and I never have these issues.
It could be.
I'm on a wireless headset and I'm committing a boo-boo by being on a wireless
Don't tell everybody that. Now everybody else will want to do it.
We'll edit that out. But depending on which one you have, because there was the 6000 and the 5000. Like if you have like a 5820K or a 5930K, those usually overclock to 4.4 to 4.6 gigahertz pretty easily. The 6000 series didn't overclock as well. But if you overclocked your 6-core to like 4.5 gigahertz, you're getting like something like a 30% like speed improvement. That's something you definitely feel.
Right.
And the important thing is to stress test. A lot of people don't do that. Their idea of stress testing is, I ran a few benchmarks, or I ran a stress test for an hour, and I'm like, no, you're not doing it right. Like this takes several hours. And there's things I do to reduce it, where I got it down about 3 hours. I can know if it's stable or not. But yeah, most people that overclock might use the auto settings in the BIOS. We're not doing that. We're just plugging in our own values and stress testing it. Whereas, just man, if you don't do that, you're gonna wonder. Because like Autodesk, for example, is one of the softwares that is very commonly used in my workstations. Autodesk Revit, they have their own problems. Brad knows. Brad supports all these Revit builds, and they're a hot mess. Like the software, even though it's several $1,000s per license per year, they can't get their stuff straight. So it's like, hey, is it the overclock or is it the software? And we got it down, or we know every time it's the software now. But it was funny when I started, I was super gun ho overclocking. I'm going to sell it on everybody, and then I slowly got more conservative to my systems. I'm not overclocking unless someone really wants to and they really understand it. But now with the white label, they want everything overclocked. So I'm back into overclocking again. But all of my systems are overclocked personally. So
now, when you talk about overclock, because overclocking back in the day was a lot simpler than all the things that you can mess with in your BIOS now. And so when you look at it, unless you're really in the know on this stuff, you're kind of like you're a deer in headlights. It's like, what am I looking at? So what are the is there like a basic set of changes that you're making in the system to overclock it? Or is it this big, large process where you've got to go and change the different values? Or do you kind of have a set standard that you use when you're putting this together?
It's gotten pretty simple again. AMD for a while was a little complicated, but it got simple again where we're changing the multiplier. So the way you get your clock speed is you have the base clock of the system, the heartbeat, the 100 megahertz heartbeat, and the CPU will multiply off of that. So if you plug in a value of 44, it's 44 times 100, you get 4.4 gigahertz. So you change the multiplier, you increase the core voltage, and if you're just overclocking the CPU, then you're good. If you're getting really expensive RAM, that might be 3,400 megahertz, you enable your XMP profile. Sometimes that's just not good enough. When you might need to actually increase your memory controller's voltage. So it's VCC, IO, and SA voltages sometimes need to go up on Intel. So there, when you're stress testing, like, do I got a RAM issue or do I got a CPU issue? So we kind of do those separately, and then we join them together, and then we do a stress test when everything's overclocked together. And so, yeah, but at the end of the day, if you just want to go for the quick gains, you enable your XMP profile to get your RAM overclock, because most people buy 3,200 megahertz RAM and they don't realize that's an overclock. You bought it, it's certified, right, but the memory controller is only certified by Intel. The newest ones are up to 2666. Yours would be DDR4 2133. So if you bought even 2,400 megahertz RAM, that's an overclock. And people sometimes leave bad reviews and like, man, this RAM didn't run at 4,000 megahertz. And I'm like, well, yeah, 4,000 megahertz, now you're weeding out the memory controllers. Not every memory controller can do 4,000 megahertz. So how do you know it was G-Skill or Corsair's fault or Intel just couldn't do it? So yeah, overclock your RAM, your CPU separately, and then put them together and make sure everything's stable is basically the process. And there's software that I use for that.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about it, and I think I've downloaded pretty much the stuff that you use. I just, to go back in and take the time, I want to do it. It's one of those things where I also want my system to work. But what you said made perfect sense. If somebody was doing this, and because in my brain, here's how I think. I'm going to go in, I'm going to make all my changes, and I'm going to go back out, and then I'm going to try to stress test it. But like you said, you don't know. You just made a bunch of changes. So it's a process that you're using by, hey, let's get the CPU first. We can get that up and going. And you're right. A lot of I think I've actually got a lot of headroom in my RAM, because I usually go up a little bit, but whatever. I can't remember because I don't deal with this stuff all the time. So I've gotten to the point where I don't care, but I do. So that makes perfect sense. Do them separately and then figure out what you can get, and then do it together, and you can get that process where now you've got a stable system that's going to run. And so that's good.
Overclocking is a whole nother story. That's even more mindless, but people often get too carried away with their RAM overclock, their VRAM. And it's like, I try to tell people to be conservative when overclocking the RAM of their video card because we don't really have tools to isolate just your GPU RAM. And that degrades faster too. So it's like, dude, take it easy on the RAM. And nowadays with Intel's or NVIDIA's boost technology, the overclock results for video cards are so little, it's not even worth my time. I can't charge someone enough morally, like, to get a 50 megahertz increase on something that's like 2000 gigahertz, 2 gigahertz. What's another 50? And I'm going to need to charge you like what, 60, 100 to do that? It's not, I don't even offer that anymore. Whereas the older stuff, you could get larger gains.
Now let's talk a little bit, because this is going to go into, and this probably does go into architects and people that are using things. When you're using a Windows operating system, one of the things that I just started using is, there's a couple things. Number one, my video card, which is usually an Asus video card. I'm still rocking a 980 GTX Ti, just because in order to get the gains, I've got to buy another $800 video card, and I'm kind of holding off until the next generation comes out. But
which is going to be announced on Monday. So
okay, good. I'm glad to hold out. So anyway, so one of the things I've been doing is you can actually go into the Asus software and you can hit game mode. And what that does is it will shut a lot of the Windows services down. Now you can do it where you're picking which Windows services are getting shut down, but that has made a huge difference in gaming, especially for first-person shooters. Now, I know we're getting real geeky here. The other thing is, and I don't know how much this helps, but there's a thing in Windows 10, and I think it came in with 1803, that is called game mode. And one of the things that it does is it does the same type of thing where it shuts Windows services off so they're not running in the background. You're not getting the notifications and things that you would do. And so what's cool about it is, in game mode, if I turn it on for a particular game, when I go back into that game, it's already on unless I physically shut it off, which is really, really slick. So I think there's a lot of things you can do if you are rendering video, let's say, and you're using a high-end video card. A lot of times you can use the software to shut all those essential Windows systems down.
I used to have a batch file for that. Yeah.
There you go. I mean, you had a what? You didn't like any of this.
A batch file. No, it was for doing other things. I don't do any of this other. I don't know what you're talking about, but you know.
You hush and sit over in the corner there.
Okay.
Brad has to support these systems and tell me whether or not like I messed up on an overclock. So that's a fun thing. I've been able to work with Brad because sometimes he'll give me tips on like network stuff, but now I get to give him tips on, all right, this is when you should get me into it, because I don't want you spinning your wheels on a hardware issue and
every time.
Now, Brad, from your standpoint, when you're working with Anthony, you're obviously supporting these systems. So where does your support stop and end with you and Anthony working together?
Well, I try to. So yeah, it's an interesting question because we're friends, and so we work together well. But like, I kind of think of him as if he were no different than Dell, right? So if I'm calling Dell support, if I get to the point where I got to call Dell support, that's essentially when I would call Anthony. So I jump in there and I'm their IT guy, and they're having an issue and I'm trying to troubleshoot. When I get to a point where I think it may be hardware related or something, now it's obviously it's so much easier to call Anthony than get on hold for 45 minutes and talk to someone at the, on any of the major manufacturers. I'm not picking on Dell. It's just my go-to, but yeah. So, go, hey man, I got a thing, and I might shoot him a text and say, hey, I'm troubleshooting this thing. I don't know if I'm going to need you, but like, this is what's going on. So your wheels can start, kind of spinning on it. So when I call you later, you've already kind of digested it or something like that, but then I'll look at it and maybe I'll figure it out on my own. But at least he's aware. And then when I call him, I'll be like, oh yeah, like there's a fan noise happening I'm going over to check it out, and it turns out that somebody must have like dropped the front of this computer or something, because the fan blade is actually broken off, and that's why it's vibrating, because it's like an 8-blade fan and it only has 7, and so it's off balance, and they're like, they failed to mention when they called me out that the front of the case was cracked, and that they must have dropped it at some point. But anyway, that's where we kind of get involved. Like, I'll let him know that I'm checking something out. And then when I can't figure it out, I'm like, hey, man, this thing's like in a boot loop. Maybe it's overheating or something. Let's work it out. But I literally just kind of think of him as like, okay, if I was going to call Dell for support, that's when I call Anthony for support.
Okay. And that makes perfect sense. And that's a great way to look at it. Because, yeah, at the end of the day, even if we're friends with the people we're working with, we still have to have that business relationship that's, hey, you're doing this, I'm doing this, and this is how it's going to support. So, Anthony, how do you look at when stuff does come in for your business as far as hardware or what people think might be hardware support, whether it be Brad or somebody else? What's your response and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so because I offer a warranty, I mean, most of the time, if it doesn't break within the first 6 months, it's probably fine. But it's usually, I've been doing builds for like 3 years now, so I haven't really had too many repairs outside of warranty. It's just warranty stuff most of the time. Anything comes up, unless it's abuse, which that has happened too. Not on Brad's end. Like, sometimes people get brave and they break their systems. But when I reach out to Brad, I know, like, hey, I'm prepared to pay his labor rate, and Brad helps me out a lot. I don't get the full retail price sometimes. Like, I don't even,
Don't tell people that. Don't tell people that.
I don't need to like refer stuff out to Brad very often though, because he's already managing the customer. And the times I need to, when Brad may not even be in the same state, like, dude, thank goodness for remote software, right? Like, and I know I'm expecting to get an invoice and vice versa, like for Brad is the only person I'll take a non-Remis built computer from. And we almost had to do that once, but I think the customer decided to just buy a new one. But stuff like that, I'll help Brad out, Now that I'm not in California, I doubt he'll ever ship me a Dell or something, but, the relationship started as, hey, we're just two mutual businesses trying to help each other out. And yeah, now we're friends, but we figured all that out when we weren't necessarily friends yet. And we just kind of roll with whatever comes our way,
And that's good. And I think a lot of people, because they look at sometimes the competition out there, and here's where I will say this is no different. There's been a lot of people right now that are talking about, and it's a little bit different, but hiring an employee. And this can be kind of the same thing, but do you hear the mutual respect in these two that shows you that they respect each other enough to do the right things? They're charging each other for services, whether it's discounted or not, Brad. Listen, that happens all the time, and that's the way the world works, man. It's all good. And as long as you guys are good with that, it's good. But you have to look at how you're treating other people in your business and how you're treating other people outside of this business. And so when you're doing that, when you're thinking about that, you want to treat people the way that you want to be treated. It's a simple rule. I know it's hard to remember when you're in the heat of the moment and things are broken and you think it's a hardware problem or you think it's a software problem. It's always easier to blame somebody else. But a lot of times it's not positive for you to do that. It's not healthful. It's not helpful in any sense of the word. So when you look at relationships and how you need to have a relationship, that's the way it should be. If there's somebody out there that you can't work with, that's one thing. And you'll know that usually right off the bat. I've always said I can usually read a person within like probably a 2-minute conversation. I can see exactly where that person is, and that's fine. But I can also see whether or not I want to continue that long-term relationship with that person. because there's people that we're not good for each other for whatever reason. And then there's others that we are good with. But I want to treat those relationships like gold because they're important to me. And so that's what I'm seeing here. And that's how you guys are working together. And I really like that. And that's part of what we're talking about as far as working together. You're not always going to be able to find this type of relationship, but really it comes down to how you treat that other person of how good the relationship can be.
Yeah, and I think the important thing too is to try to form relationships before you need to use their services. One of the early, I got a chance to do a few little projects for NZXT, the computer case manufacturer. They do a lot of stuff now. My first project with them was to do a custom, it's like a case mod for Rocket League, because the first ever World Championship was going to be held in LA. And they wanted something completely custom, and it needed custom paint and this and that. And I'm like, dude, I can't paint at all. But I laid down I laid down the groundwork where on Instagram I found a guy that did beautiful artwork on RC cars with airbrush. And I remember reaching out to him like a long time ago. Hey, if I ever had a custom project, can I call you? Yeah, and I knew he was good at his work because he had a portfolio on Instagram. So we got to work together. It turns out he's an engineer for an RC car company. So he's someone that I know I could work with in other ways besides just paint. But when that project came, I didn't need to turn it down because I already had somebody. I didn't need to try to tackle every aspect of a project. Because these custom builds take so much time. It's like you can only do so much at the same time, and they don't pay the bills. Like the standardized systems pay the bills. And I don't want to turn down those projects because they're fun.
Right.
So, and
those are the ones that get like broadcast more on like Instagram or social media and stuff too, because they're like the cool ones. So those get you like a little bit more notoriety and stuff. So
yeah, and it turns out. Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say one of the things too that I've seen, and this has always been there's been people who've wanted to work for me before, and I will look at their custom built machine and go, oh, hell no. There's just that just ain't happening, because you can tell by the pride that somebody puts into their own personal stuff of what type of person they're going to be. And so I remember, gosh, this is going back a long time. My very first car was a 78 Volkswagen Rabbit. Now, this car was a light blue because that was a popular color back then. It was a light blue and rust. Now, this car was a plain Jane car, not a real big deal. But here's the thing. One of the things I did, and I remember it was in February, right before my birthday, I got this thing. I can't remember what I paid for it. Needed a little rear end work. We got a little rear end work done to it. I think it needed a couple struts or something, a couple shocks or whatever. Might have been front end work. Anyways, got all that stuff done, but I brought it home and I took dark blue house paint with a paint brush, not even a roller, with a paint brush. And I painted this thing by hand, including the black rims, including the coat hanger that I used for the radio. Everything was blue. And I put covers on the inside. And one of the things my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, almost 30 years.
I was going to say your ex-girlfriend, right? Because now that she saw this car that you painted, but never mind.
No, she was so impressed. I would wax this car. I would take the inside was vacuumed. The dash was wiped. I mean, it was, I'll tell you what, for being an older car that I painted with a house brush. And here's the thing. I was the only one of my friends who knew how to drive a stick. And so, therefore, all my other friends, they can say now that they've gotten sports cars and different things and they've been able to drive a stick was because of me, because I taught them how to drive a stick in my 78 Volkswagen Rabbit. But this thing was, again, I took care of things no matter how old or how bad they were. And so you could tell by the type of person I was, oh yeah, I'd want to do work with that person. Or, in this particular case, talking about computers, if you saw my computer build, you'd go, yeah, I'd work with. It's nowhere near what Anthony does, but it's good enough to where people would go, yeah, he's a neat freak and likes his stuff all organized and whatnot.
Jeff, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. What are you going to say?
I'm laughing because, my first car, which I still have, is a '66 Mustang. It was springtime yellow, and that's a cute color. It's not like I'm not gonna roll up to like the street races in a cute like springtime yellow, right? So I rattle canned it black at the like years and years ago, and so I'm laughing at your house paint story because I'm like, yeah, I'm like spray painting it with like barbecue, like flat black. Hey, high temperature. This is gonna last in California a lot better. So, yeah. Except mine is still barbecue.
So all three of us have hand painted a car, is what we're saying. Because I have done that too.
Incorrectly, or did you do yours properly?
Oh no, I did the same thing. I rattle canned mine, but I went to a professional paint, like a commercial paint store for painters, and I was like, hey, give me the best metal like spray paint because I'm gonna spray paint a car. You're not supposed to. And I wanted to at least last like a year before it falls apart. But I did. I mean, we've all painted a car.
It's sad because I can see how spray paint has been regulated by the EPA or whatever, because spray paint used to be way stronger. I mean, this paint job's over 10 years, and like, there's no way like rattle can today would last this long.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll tell you what, we got one email I want to read because for the next 2 weeks, there is no show, and that's because we have the IT Owners Compass, which is coming up the 24th, 25th, and 26th in Chicago, and that's where I'll be for 3 days, so I won't be doing a podcast. And if you're going there, I will see you there. And also, the next week is Labor Day weekend. So we're getting to the back to school. I know some kids are back to school already, but we're getting to that season where we're going to go ahead, and a lot of people do stuff on that weekend. We're going to take that weekend off. So for the next couple weeks, we will not have a show. So to give everybody time to send in the emails and stuff they want answered or talked about. But I got an email, and this says, love the show. Taught me many things so far, even the things we do differently in our shop. Reasons why need to be evaluated over time. And this is from Michael. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. Glad you're getting something out of the show. So I'll tell you what, guys, we could probably geek out forever. I will say this. Last question, Anthony, before we get on out of here. NVIDIA or ATI?
Why are you even asking that? No, I'm just kidding. NVIDIA, man. I want Intel. Actually, I don't know if you know, Intel's actually making video cards now. They're going to release it in 2020. But I hope Intel brings competition to video cards because NVIDIA is just so far.
They won't.
They stole AMD's lead GPU guy, and they have the money. So
they won't.
I hope you're wrong, because NVIDIA is just, they're so far ahead of AMD right now. And I'm not a fanboy. I'm not trying to upset the Radeon guys. It's just like their highest end video card can maybe keep up with the GTX 1080. Well, NVIDIA has the 1080 Ti, the Titan XP, and now they're releasing their next generation. NVIDIA all the way.
The problem is, though, and so I don't know, maybe we're in the 1%ers, 10%ers, something like that. Because here's the thing. My boys built a system. I had them custom build a computer 3 years ago. I think it was 3 years ago. And for bang for the buck, I got them an ATI, and I can't remember what it was. 280s. I don't know. Again, I don't pay attention too much, except when I'm researching this stuff. And then I usually go to PCPer.com and look at what they recommend and go with that. Like an idiot, I probably should have just went to you and say, hey, dude, what do you recommend? But
no, in the mid-range, AMD they're good in the mid-range. They're really,
so
RX.
For 1080p gaming, which is what still a lot of people are doing, those are perfectly fine cards, and they can play everything at high resolution and all that. So that's fine. Now, for some of the stuff that I do, because I have a 2K monitor, I haven't gone to the 4K because I don't see the need. 2K is already hard enough, and I'm already starting to see the 980. Unless I do some things with the software, with the video card, or use game mode, I'm starting to see a little bit of choking on even
Yeah.
2K gaming in my system.
No, yeah. You're the guy that needs a NVIDIA. The mid range, it's really anybody's game. NVIDIA's more power efficient, but I mean, we were doing real time VR rendering, like, or VR walkthroughs, and I'm not talking about video game VR. I'm talking about the software they're using is calculating the light path off of the different materials. Like a year ago, a 980 Ti was choking, and I'm like, this doesn't look, guys. Based on what I'm seeing, you need to upgrade to the 1080 Ti. I don't really know what else to tell you. Yeah, this was 6 months ago. This was the best, but it's not anymore. And sure enough, that fixed it. And that's at the customer Brad and I tag team. So, that was, I think, a scenario where Brad got me involved. I think Brad was the front man on that, actually. I think it was Tyler's system, Brad, or who's the guy that worked next to Chris? No, that's not Justin, is it?
No, it was. We're gonna start name dropping people that nobody knows.
Yeah, it's
no,
okay because
no, yeah, it was. It was Justin and Ryan, and they both had the first gen.
Yeah,
and then they were the only ones that had AMD ATI cards, and then from then on we did NVIDIA.
Yeah, and that's how, in the workstation world, the life cycle really is only like 3 years, like, because then the new guys get these fast computers and everyone's kind of like envious. And this is just a great client that actually has a good upgrade cycle. So, but yeah, back to, I digress. NVIDIA.
All right, no, that's good. And yeah, as far as the cycle, you're right. I think 3 years before, like I said, I built this computer 2 years ago, and I'm already seeing some issues which I probably could work out. But let's face it, as IT people, the last system we want to work on is our own, or maybe I do, but I just don't have the time or don't take the time to do it like I should, along with all the other responsibilities that I have. But I'll tell you what, this was a great show, and I'd love to, Anthony, anytime. I know you have a Twitch channel and stuff like that. So why don't you let people know where they can find you at and where they can find out more about the stuff that you do? And I'm assuming that you sell custom builds to pretty much anybody that will pay you money, correct?
Yeah. So primarily the front line, the webpage, remiscs.com, REMIS, CS for Computer Solutions. And then my social media buttons are at the bottom. I have a Twitch channel where I do live DLids, live builds. Twitter and Instagram would be my two most active social media. And I don't know, just shoot me a question or whatever. Happy to help.
Yes, he is. He's answered a lot of my questions. I appreciate it, Anthony. And thanks for coming on the show and sharing.
Yeah, no, totally. Thank you for having me on.
All right. And Brad, let people know where they can find you at in the here and now or near future or wherever.
Well, if you're coming to Chicago, you can come shake my hand. That'd be great.
I'm gonna punch you in the shoulder, but
next week, no, I expect there'll be some shin swiping or shoulder or whatever. Hit me in the face, whatever. Don't go big or go home, Jeff. Like, don't hit me if you're gonna throw it. But no, if otherwise, just hit me up at brad@ttcscomputerservices.com. And I just want to say, spend time with your family. Keep up with your parents. Take that time. Go have a barbecue.
Awesome.
Get it where you can.
Yep, definitely. Good advice. All right, come join us live for the Computer Repair Podcast every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern over at podnutz.com/CRP Live. Join in on the conversation by hanging out in the chat room where people are going back and forth, asking questions and getting them answered, and just interacting with us. You can also send an email to podnutz@podnutz.com or leave a voicemail at 734-335-1000. It's free as long as you're in the U.S. I want to thank everyone for listening and subscribing to the show. We'll see you next time on the Computer Repair Podcast.